Today, I want to talk about something important, and I think it is the elephant in the room of sorts. I've seen so many portfolios lately where I see the entire design process of some of the designers. And what I want to talk about today specifically is my design process that I follow for a fast paced product company. So, hi, my name is Ujjwal. I am the product design manager at Spinny. I manage a team of designers and researchers here, and I come with 10 years of UX design experience. So, I hope you find this video useful. So, first things first, we need to define a problem statement. Now, by defining a problem statement, I mean to be exact, definite about what problem you want to solve with this design exercise. So it cannot be too wide, it cannot be too vague, it has to be very definite and very focused on the exact problem that you and your team are trying to solve with this design exercise. Along with defining the problem statement, you also need to define the scope of work, which is basically taking that problem statement into a design solution and how much of design work is actually required, how many screens do you want to create, how many features do you want to create, and you need to define that right at the beginning of the project so that you are able to give accurate timelines. Now, this is a very critical step because a lot of times I see designers underestimating timelines where they would say that they would finish a work in a couple of days or probably a week, but it actually takes a lot more than that. So, here are two things. Okay, so one thing that you need to consider is what is your other engagement at that particular time? Are you working on other projects? Is that taking your time, or are you going to only work on this specific design problem? All right. The second thing is you need to basically have a buffer for all the iterations that are going to happen, because design is never going to be a linear process. All right, so it will always be iterative. Once you give your first solution, you'll have to come back to it and you'll have to do more iterations. So you always keep that buffer. So ideally, what the formula that I use to give timelines is you keep 60% of the time for actual work and 40% you keep for a buffer time, which you keep for any kind of iterations that happen on that particular project. All right, so once we have a problem statement defined, our scope of work analyzed, and our timelines managed with our stakeholders, we can move on to the next step, which is basically gathering insights. Now, here is that one place where you can gather insights from your PM. You can have a deeper discussion with your PM. You can also go to your business teams and understand why exactly do we need to solve this problem from a business perspective. And this is also the time where you can do some secondary research, because in secondary research, you don't really need to have a user researcher with you. You can do that all by yourself. So in secondary research, you can include any kind of competitive analysis that you can do. You can look at other competitor products, all right, who are doing some similar solution somewhere. And in case if you are creating something novel, which is an industry first, you can always look at a similar functioning feature in some other product. So for example, if I'm designing a form for my company, I'll probably look at forms in general that are used everywhere else. And one of the things, one of the companies that I took inspiration while designing forms was Duolingo, and how they have gamified the whole process. So you can take inspiration from other industries as well. It does not need to be your own industry, all right? And another thing here that you should do is understand analytics. All right. So analytics is something which is always going to be your best friend because it is accessible. You can have a look at data anytime you want, because most of the time a good product company will always have an analytics team. Even if they don't have that, the PM will be responsible for analytics. So you can go to the PM and ask for the numbers. And here's how you do that. Okay. So if you're designing an existing feature, you can look at the functioning of the current feature. Where are the drops? Where is the user dropping? So you understand wherever there is a friction. All right. If you're working on something which is related to a lead conversion page, so you can look at the funnel clearly where all the drops are happening, and then you can basically hypothesize your solution according to that. If it's a new feature that you're working on, that's somewhere where analytics won't really help you, but still you can look at the entry point. So let's say I'm designing a feature, and before that there are certain steps that the user needs to do. So you can still look at the volume of users that are coming and what are the other places where the user is actually dropping. So once you've gathered all this information, it's very important now for you to define success matrix. Why? Because if you're designing a solution, you need to know where the impact of the solution is going to be. What is it that we are targeting? So, a success matrix example could be you want to create more leads. That could be a success matrix. You want people to complete the process more. So, completion rate could be a success matrix. Or you want efficiency with your users. If you're working for an internal product, efficiency could be a success matrix. So, whatever that success matrix is, you need to know that beforehand before you start designing the product. And that is something that you're going to track after you have completed your design. So this is very important. And this is also very important for your portfolios. If you're creating portfolios of out of your work, this is one thing that you need to keep tracking in your entire design journey. Right. So once you've defined your success matrix, you can now move on to the next step where you identify if there is scope for primary research. Now, why I say you need to identify if there is scope is because of two things. One, you may not need it, and the second thing, you may not have the time to do it. But let's talk about the case where you have the time to do it. All right. So in that case, you can think about what kind of user research you want to do. You can do a survey, which is the easiest way to get some kind of sense from a large number of users. Or if you want to go in more details, let's say you looked at the analytics and you saw some numbers dropping unexpectedly at some points. So for that, you need to speak to the users directly. So for that, user interviews is a very good way to talk to users. You can do it telephonically. You don't need to actually, go and sit with users. However, if you can, please do that. But in my current organization, we have done it telephonically. We have spoken to users one-on-one. We have also scheduled Google Meet invites where I can see their screen, while they're using our product. So there are multiple ways of doing it. But again, the kind of time you have, you need to align that research with the time. All right. And another very important tool that you can use here if you're working to improve an existing feature is usability testing. So usability testing is a powerful tool where you observe a user perform specific tasks that you probably give them, or you can just do a natural observation where you see them using the product and you just observe where all there is a friction. And then when you design an improvement of that feature, you work on those particular features. So these are the things that can be a part of your primary research. If you don't have the time, then you can skip this part and move on to designing the MVP. MVP is your minimum viable product. So what I do there is I have 2 or 3 design directions that I want to take. So I'll quickly draw out a low fidelity or a medium fidelity mockup where I am using all the components because we have a design system in place. So I don't actually need to do the wireframing part. And I take 2 or 3 design directions that I want to take and I create a prototype for it. So one thing that I've done and I've been doing is I have been able to create quick prototypes. Prototypes are very important because they give you the sense of the actual flow of the product. Sometimes it may not just be enough to just look at the visual design and take any decision. But when you actually use it, when you actually click on a clickable prototype with some of those interactions that Figma allows you to do, using Smart Animate, they actually give a lot of sense of what the actual product is going to look like. So I do that. I take 2 or 3 design directions, which I call the MVP product. I take them and I show it to the stakeholders and then we finalize on one of those directions. Once we have finalized, then we come on to the next step where I then fully scale out that design. So what I do is then I basically design the entire flow. I take care of all the use cases, the edge cases, and I make sure that I've covered the entire scope of the design work that we had discussed initially. Now, one of the things here and which I want to highlight is sometimes as designers and even as PMs, what we end up doing is we start designing for the edge cases more than the primary cases. So that is something to look out for. Let's say 95% of our users behave in a typical way and only 5% of your users behave in a different way. You may want to design for the 95% first, then to look for that 5%. A lot of times when people are solving for edge cases, they end up making a mistake to design for the edge case user, thinking of them as the primary user. So that is one thing to look out for. Once my design is ready, I meet up again with my PM and just finalize the last bit. Once we are all on board with the design, I do the dev handoff where I share a dev ready file with the developers. Now, there, one thing which is very important is making sure your dev ready file does not have any kind of clutter. All the flows are absolutely clear. And you share a separate design file link and a separate prototype link with your developer, because developers would want to look at and inspect each and every element, whereas they would also want to look at the prototype. Prototype actually helps them get a sense of what the user flow is like. So that's also important. I feel that you should, wherever possible, share a prototype with your developer. Once the dev handoff is done, the developers start working on it, and I wait for the time where I can do a dev UAT, which is a user acceptance test from a design standpoint. So I do that, which, in a lot of places that could be called design sanity or design QA. So all those terms mean the same thing. And I do that by sitting with the developer and giving them a list of improvements or suggestions where they might have missed design the way that it should have been made in the development. Once the dev UAT or the design sanity is completed, it's ready for production and the product or the project goes live. After the release, one very important thing that a lot of designers may miss is tracking how your design is actually performing. This is one of the most important steps of the whole process. You started with an assumption and you gave a solution. Did that solution work? You need to track your design projects. And the way to do that is, at least what I do, I'll tell you about it. So after a couple of weeks or 3 weeks after the release has been done, the PM is going to constantly track the performance of that project. You go back to the PM and ask them, is this design project a success or not? And if they say it is a success, then you need to understand what matrix did you move. And you can also go back to where you define the success matrix and then come and check with the final outcome that actually happened or not. Now, what this will do is, of course, it will be something to boast of in your portfolio or in your work, but it will also build your design intuition for your future projects where you make decisions based off of this project. So this is my entire design process. This was actually a very long video. So I hope you got something from it. Please let me know in the comments what I should talk about next. And I hope you enjoyed the video and you learned something from it. This was just my perception or my way of working. There is no right and wrong method, but this is what I have been doing, at least at this point of time in my career. And I feel free to give me any suggestions. That's it for this video. Thank you, and do subscribe to this channel if you feel that the content that I'm creating is meaningful to you. Thank you and have a good day.